My name's Adele Onyango and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. This is like the fourth time I am starting this episode. Oh my goodness. I'm in such a strange space, but okay, let's just start. First and foremost, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Welcome to episode 133. Let me show you around. First, join our online family community on Instagram. We're at Legally Clueless Podcast. There is a link to the page in the show notes. If you want to share a story on this podcast, there's a link to that as well in the show notes. There's also a link to our YouTube channel, which I think you really ought to check out. In fact, we just posted the final episode from our tour series, which is the episode of when we were in Kisumu. Very special episode to me because we not only recorded such powerful stories, but it ends with me going home, like to my home. I feel like Africans will get that, you know what I mean? So we went to like where my late mom rests. And, you know, you'll see my grandmother in that episode. She cooked a storm for us, like for 10,000 people. And we were just 4. And I think I talked about this in earlier episodes, being able to just like duck and go sit by my mom's grave, which was very emotional. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons that's such a special episode for me. So I think you should really check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. I've gotten very good feedback from people who've watched it already. And it's I think the tour series for me, why I love it is that it was just so organic. We weren't setting out to put on a show. Everything I was experiencing, you were experiencing with me. It just happened so organically. And I'm proud that it wasn't like forced. I didn't have to be anything other than myself. And yeah, go check it out. There's a link to our YouTube channel in the show notes. Speaking of the Kisumu episode, the story in this episode and actually next week's episode as well, because it's part 1 and part 2, is one of the stories we recorded in Kisumu. Edna's story, listen to this.
There was a club called Spree in Eldoret. So on this day, we go to the club, dancing. Then there's this tall, handsome Kiman came over. And those were the days for Kina Matonya, sijui Vaileti, sijui nini. So we danced. He followed me out. So just as I was getting into the cab, he's like, hey, you've not given me your number. So I'm there, 1 foot in the cab, like 0723. So there's also a clique of chicks. Now those chicks were in law school and they're dating med school guys. So I was finally part of that clique. A week later, so I learned that he had a son. He had a 3-year-old son. We dated for like 2 years now. I'm getting into my 4th year. Then I find out I was pregnant. So I successfully hid my pregnancy for 7 months. And my mom had met him. And you know, interestingly, the first time my mom met him, aliniambia, this guy is not good for you. This guy is going to break your heart. And so in the graduation square, vile watu wamekaa, me I'm there very pregnant, looking like a frog. My skin had broken out. I was ashy. Then I bumped into him. And so he just looked at me head to toe. And then he nodded.
I really enjoyed recording Edna's story. I can't wait for you to hear part 1 of it a little later in this episode. But before we get there, I'm in such a weird space. Like even recording this is much harder. Like it's normally not hard. I don't know what's happening. Well, I do know what's happening. So I'm just going to put it out there. Now I'm second guessing what I'm feeling. You know, when you're feeling something and you're trying to navigate it, and then now when it's time to talk about it, you're just like, but maybe someone's navigating something that's much harder. But whatever. This is a safe space. It's been creeping up on me slowly, but I'm really battling feelings of inadequacy and like imposter syndrome. And I thought I had it like locked down, but I don't. I really don't. And I think for me, what's irking me is that it's not rational. Because right now, there's nothing that I'm doing that I can say is like failing horribly and making me feel bad about myself. In fact, there's so many good things I'm doing. I mean, the tour series, you know, and a lot of stuff that I'm working on right now is really exciting. Even the partners I have are people who I started the year wanting to work with, and now I'm working with them. So it's good stuff around me. And I guess that's what's frustrating. It's just like, chick, look around you. Like, why can't you tap into the good around you and the things that you're doing around you and stop feeling inadequate? But I can't shake it. And I think what's even like, what would I say? Exhausting. That's the word. What's even exhausting is that you have these horrible thoughts going through your mind, and you still have to show up. You still have to show up and get work done, because adulting, right? And I mean, having a change of environment in Diani, I was in Diani last week with Val, was good, but I was still working. Like, I was the only person at the hotel for like every breakfast. I had my laptop there just responding to emails and blah, blah, blah. And I had to like schedule my day to have spaces where I was breathing. But at the same time, I was working on a shoot that I was getting right into as soon as I came back from Diani. And so it was... I don't know if you've ever experienced it, like where you just want your mind to just shut up for 2 seconds. You know what I mean? It's like I have little toddlers in my head screaming constantly about how inadequate I am. And I'm just like, shh, can you guys just, for at least even 24 hours? And yeah, I think just voicing it, that's it. It's mentally exhausting to have to show up while trying to restructure those thoughts with all like the coping exercises that I know and things like that. It's exhausting. And then what happens is, if I don't finish everything on my to-do list, or I'm late sending something or whatever, it reinforces that thought of inadequacy. You know what I mean? It's really exhausting. I'm mentally exhausted at my most busiest time of work. And I apologize. I think my neighbor just like increased the volume of her water pump. Like, is that even possible? How... Surely. But yeah, and I know I've probably said this on the podcast before, because maybe I hadn't experienced this particular moment, and just shared about the importance of making time for rest, making time to breathe, blah, blah, blah. I did not take my own advice, clearly. And it's easier some moments to do that, but then there's some moments where adulting is just demanding that you show up. And when you are running your own business, especially going into December, I kind of have to hit certain revenue goals before January, because first, next year is an election year. I don't really know how that's going to go. January is always like weird in terms of, well, this January was not bad, but you know, you just prepare because you don't know. January is normally very slow. And so I wish these feelings came like earlier in the year. I could deal with that, or let them come in January, you know, not right now. I just, even like right now, I feel like I'm rambling. You see, like I've been second guessing whether I'm adequately telling you about my feelings of inadequacy. Like, what is that? Okay. If this is a feeling that you felt before and something worked, something helped you, I am all ears to hear what that thing was. You can DM me, whatever platform you're listening to this on, or even on the Legally Clueless Instagram page, because I have to like remain on the go until probably mid-December. So my mind needs to just, you know, snap out of it. Well, not snap out of it, but like we just need to navigate this, you know? Okay, enough downers. On to good things. Song of the week. This one I stumbled on while in Diani, and our DJ was so awesome, playing such lit music. And one night we're on the dance floor. Fal has even gone to help him DJ or whatever. I don't know. We were just acting a fool. And the DJ plays this particular song, and I completely zone out. I don't know if you've ever felt that. I think it's only happened to me like at festivals, or when a particular artist who I love is performing and I just like get lifted by their song or their performance. I don't think it's ever happened on a dance floor. Well, until now. And I had to run to the DJ's laptop to just be like, what song is that? And got the name and jotted it down so I could share it with you. It's called Sama Yomuthi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's by Black Diamond. I have no idea what this song is about. None whatsoever. But there's just something about the vibe that is just so lifting. You kind of like forget everything around you for a while. Well, at least for me. So I don't know if that's gonna happen for you. Why don't you try listening to it? There is a link to the song in the show notes. Let's jump into 100 African stories. This is a story we recorded in Kisumu. I am so thankful to Edna. She came from the neighboring Kakamega, came to Kisumu, shared this powerful story, and I think we recorded it for like an hour and a half. So I've divided it into part 1, part 2. So part 2 will come out next week, but part 1 is in this episode, and it's really Edna's story about her baby daddy, his baby mama, and a curious case of character development. 100 African stories on Legally Clueless, coming to you from the road. We partnered with Africa No Filter to take this podcast on tour to Nakuru, Kisumu, Mombasa, and Nairobi, bringing you powerful and inspiring African stories.
So my name is Edna Ayeko. My name is Luo, but I'm not Luo. I was named after my grandmother. I come from Kakamega County, specifically a village called, in Butere, a village called Eshishevu, right in the middle of Butere. I am 36 years old, a lawyer by profession, a mother to a 12-year-old boy. I went to university in the year 2005. I joined Moi University for my LLB, and because I was quite a sheltered child, I'm my mother's only daughter, so I was amongst boys, very sheltered. I had those curfews for 4:30 ukwe hapa nini nini. So I found myself in uni and I was a fish out of water. So uni was fun. So that was the time to drink. I had my first drink when I was in uni. The first time I went to a club, I was in uni. My first boyfriend was in uni, so I was, yay. Now, the difference was that when I went to Moe, our law school was a pioneer class in law school. So our campus was in some village area. So we didn't quite get the campus experience because there were no hostels. So guys used to live all over town. So you're not really living in hostels, so it wasn't confined. Uni was fun, the usual skiving school, kudanganya mumenda trip, you've been told to buy some book that doesn't exist. So when I was in my third year, I remember there was a club called Spree in Eldoret. I think it's still there. So Spree was the club everyone used to go to. And so on this, I think it was a Friday. So I went out with my friends, went to Spree. And because we are broke, campus broke people, it meant when it was time to leave the club, you all had to leave so that you dandia one cab and pay 20 bob each. It was about 200 bob. So you just had the cab and head home. So on this day, we got to the club, dancing. Then there's this tall, handsome Kiman came over. And those were the days for kina matonya, sijui vaileti, sijui nini. So we danced. And now my boys told me it's time to go. Interestingly, I used to hang out with boys. And so I was always in a gang of boys. So they tell me, yeah, we need to go. And so I leave this guy dancing. And I'm looking for like a small pass. I'm like, we need to go. The cab is waiting. So I had a bit of a Cinderella moment. Because now, when you got to the cab, this guy he followed me out. So just as I was getting into the cab, he's like, hey, you've not given me your number. So I'm there, one foot in the cab, like 0723. So the cab left. So I'd given him my number, just nearly shout, and I left. So I went home, life continued, and I think 3 days later, I get a call from this guy. Like, hi, it's so-and-so, remember me? I'm like, from where? Which one? That one. I'm like, oh, you remembered my number. So I'm so-and-so, I'm in med school. What do you do? So remember, it's a club meeting, so there's no discussion of what are you doing, where do you study? So now we're like, oh, you're in law school. Oh, I'm in med school. He was doing his 4th year then. And so we should meet up, whatever. I'm like, okay. And see, at the end of the day, the idea is to date higher, So I'm like, let's go, okay, not bad. And so we met up, and it was fun. He was a fun guy. And also what I liked about him was he was not the typical guy for Kampuati, let's go drink, let's do what. He was like, now it's morning, wake up, let's go to the library, let's study. And then we study a bit. It's like, we are bored now, let's go CG buy food. So I was married already. 2 weeks later, I was married to a med school guy. And that was the ultimate goal. So there's also a clique of chicks. Now those chicks were in law school and they're dating med school guys. So I was finally part of that clique. And so that went on. So a week later, so I learned that he had a son. He had a 3-year-old son. So I was like, hey, now I'm already being a stepmother at 20 or 22. I'm like, what happened? So he told me he'd met a girl the first day they'd gone to med school. So they were taken to the hospital for visits and whatever. Spotted a girl. Things happened. The next time the girl called her, she was pregnant. So they had a son. And the mother to the child was also in med school. So now they've been in med school for 3 years together. They are trying to co-parent as students. So the boy is there. I didn't mind him. Once in a while, they'd come to my place with him. It was normal. I didn't sit out. So people were like, hey, how would you be a stepmother at this point? You're a stepmother. I'm like, no. But now this lady sort of didn't give us peace at the time of our relationship. Like she would show up at random places. Like you've gone for swimming, you'll just see her with the child. Hey, what do you think he's thinking seeing you here? Wanafikiria baba yake ako na nani? What are you confusing the boy? So she pulled those stunts for so long. So she was always in our space, or you're chilling with him in his room. She'd show up. She's like, hey, you're supposed to give me money for CG what? So that happened. So that lady, let's put her aside because she's a big part of this story. So we dated for like 2 years now. I'm getting into my 4th year. Then I find out I was pregnant. And so I called him. In fact, I found out I was pregnant in a club because it's still that campus. You're still running around all over. So I'm telling my friends, I'm not feeling well. They're like, you always have pregnancy scares. This is nothing. That makes you go buy a kit and pima. In the middle of clubbing. So we went, got a kit. First one positive. I'm like, oh my God, you guys is positive. We did a second one. Oh my God. So we are just there now, all huddled up together. We are crying, we are laughing. We're like, we should go to med school and tell him. We should tell him and see what he's going to do. It's probably 9 in the night or whatever. And because now if you've been to Eldoret, med school is literally in town. It's 5 minutes away from where we were. And so we go to his hostel. He's just there chilling, reading his 2 books, listening to music on his computer. I've shown up with like 5 girls. We're like, she's pregnant, Then he's like, what's all this? Why have you come with so much drama? Ama, you're high, you go sleep. We'll talk about this tomorrow. So the week that followed was hey, I'm so excited. I think it's a boy. And then he'd call you again. Now, hey, I feel like we are too young. I don't think we should have a baby right now. Then he'll chill a bit. Okay, no, it's a boy. So, it's that whole, today it's this, tomorrow it's this. And I remember at one point he called me out for lunch. He took me out for lunch. And so we are chilling and he had something in a tissue paper. And he told me, you take this. He just ran them across the table. Then he's like, now this pills you. You'll take one, put it under your tongue. After 6 hours, there's this other one you'll insert in your privates. Within an hour or so, the abortion process will start. So I'm like, okay, now we are here again. I told him, no, I'm not going to do that. So we had a lot of back and forth. I remember that time, I'm sitting my final papers in 4th year that year. So I told him, let me just sit my exams and then we'll come back and have this discussion. Still doing that thing for her. Are you fine? Are you okay? Do you want anything? Should I send you fruits? Then the next time, you should have taken those pills the way. So it was that constant back and forth. And so I finished my exams and I really don't know what I was waiting for. I think I was waiting for a signal from him, like now, I don't know if I wanted to move into his hostel, I don't know. And so my dad tells me, well, Mama, you finished school. Why am I still paying rent? You sat your final exams, you started clearing. That time my parents were living in Mombasa. Come back home. So I go and tell him, hey, boss, now I'm supposed to go home. He's like, see you go, see you when they home. So I'm like, of course I'm going to go home, but now, what is this? Like me, I've told you what I've said what I've said. So you amua. And so I went back home. And I've always been big. I've never been those skinny. I think last time I was skinny, I was in class 2. But this time I was having nausea. I was sick 24/7. And so by the time my mom sees me, and nilikuwa nimekonda, nimeishaisha. My mom is like, whatever you're doing, Mama, is working. You are losing weight. You're looking so nice. I'm just there thinking, hey, if only, So I successfully hid my pregnancy for 7 months. Just in my mom's house. 7 months, I'm just chilling, nothing is happening. And then one day I felt like I couldn't do it. But you see, I was buying small little clothes and hiding them in my room and doing this and that. And my mom is an FBI, so she'd seen them. But she knows I love kids. So I think she convinced herself that I was doing this for somewhere I have a friend who's expecting or whatever. She never imagined it could be me. Because I was the innocent one. I don't go anywhere. I don't do anything. I'm just chilling, quiet, no going out. So I think both of them never expected that from me. And so one day I got tired of hiding, and wearing baggy clothes. And only our house help knew I was expectant. Because at that time, all I wanted was beans in coconut sauce and chapo. So the minute my mom left, I would tell auntie, and then she was from Mombasa, so she'd make nice whatever's for me and I'd eat. So she's the only person who knew about that. So one day I got tired of hiding. So of course I told my pastor about it. My pastor told my parents. And trust me, there was no bash. There was no congratulations, well done, daughter of mine, none of that. It was hell from that point. So fast forward. So this guy, I'm still talking to him. I'm like, hey, this is happening. And my dad said, you know what, me, I don't want anything from this guy. Can you just show his face at least to show that I am responsible? That's it. I don't want him to marry you. I don't want his money. I want nothing from him. And my dad calls me Mama because he named me after his mother. And so he'd come and tell me, Mama, what have you done? You see now, you should be looking for work right now. Here you are. My mom on the other side is giving me hell. Yani. There was no resting point. And my mom had met him. And interestingly, the first time my mom met him, aliniambia, this guy is not good for you. This guy is going to break your heart. The first time. So I'm just thinking, what do you know? What do you know? Hey. So this was like probably 2-3 years later. Now this is maybe 2 years later. This is happening. And so mom is like, it's that Mukisi guy. And yeah, see, I told you. And so fast forward now. We are now in December. I was due on the 23rd of December. My graduation day was the 19th of December. And because now he had one more year of med school, me and him graduated on the same day. My brother as well. So we were 3 people who knew each other closely on that day. And so in the graduation square, vile watu wamekaa, me and they are very pregnant, looking like a frog. My skin had broken out. I was ashy. Then I bumped into him. And so he just looked at me, head to toe. And then he nodded. I didn't say a word. So I went, graduated, of course. And 3 days later, I was in hospital. So baby came. It was a very lonely experience because now you see you've disappointed your parents. All your friends now have graduated. You think they're there waiting for you to give birth. They're out partying, doing what? So it was a very lonely experience. And so when the baby when I got my son, I don't think I had that moment. Their mother said, oh my God, he's so precious, my baby, I didn't have that. Because I see when my boy was born, no one tells you that when you have a natural, but sometimes your kid comes out with a deformed head. And so just looking at this baby, I'm like, why is his head like this? So who is the mother to this person, And then I'm like, God, honey, you've met this man, help me, and now you've given me a deformed child. I didn't have those wow moments. And then this mama who comes with the notification, the birth notification, you have to sign it on that day. So it's like mother's name, father's name, and what are you going to call this boy? So because I'm very selfish, my name is an E-name. I knew I was going to give him an E-name. So I knew his name was going to be Ethan, but I didn't know what else to call him. And so I remember calling him. I was like, hey, hi. And while all this happened, we still talk. Once in a while, he's good. He'd actually call. Hi, how are you doing? How is everything? So I tell him, we never discussed what names you're going to give this boy. And he told me, I've never forgotten those words. He told me, you can call that thing whatever you want to call it. And so I sat there, man. And I didn't know, I hadn't thought. I just thought of Ethan. I didn't know there were other names that should come after that name. And so I just thought of my grandfather in the village. He's called Japheth. So I threw in that Japheth there. Then I thought of my father's name and threw those 3 names and just sat and I was like, those are the names. And but later my father telling me, see, hey, you just have gotten another one now, Japheth. I'm like, no, I didn't have any other name. And so that happened. And because then again, being brought up in a family where everything is systematic. It's A, B, C, D. So this getting a baby was not going to stop me from doing what I was supposed to do. So this is December. In January, I was meant to join Kenya School of Law. So there was no time. I had like 2 weeks to be a mother, to go back to being a student. And so when my son was 5 days old, we moved to Nairobi with him. And I moved to Umoja, and got a tiny bed sitter. So it was me, him, and a house help. And so it's that hustle of going to Karen every day to law school and trying to be a mother. And it was crazy. And his friends, because his friends were now my friends. And some of his friends would even come and visit us in Umoja. And they're like, oh my God, this boy just looks like his dad. And said, what's the situation? So he kept getting a lot of information even through his friends. So I think I was very petty then. Because now I also realized this guy had finally cleared. And he'd gotten a job at Thika Level 5 hospital. And things were not easy for me at that point. Because my parents did not give me a soft landing. No. It was hell. You made a choice. This is what it means to be a mother. So I hustled through that season of my life. Eventually reached out to him at some point. I was like, hey, man, you need to help me out with this kid. And then he tells me, you see this woman that I mentioned earlier. And at that time, they had broken up completely. This woman had found her way back into his life, or so I was told. And now they were both living together in Thika. And I don't know if at that time they were expecting another child or whatever the situation was. And so we went through, to cut the story short, we went through the whole process of the court process. We went through DNA testing and all those things. And so by the time my son was turning 3, he had now fully come back into his life. And interestingly, I didn't hold any grudges. I wasn't mad at what had happened. And I think for me, from the word go, my biggest fight was for my son to have an identity, to have his father, to know his people, because on my end, there was no soft landing. So I needed him to have his people. So around this time, I got a job at Amref in Magadi. And for the first time, I had some little money. And I'm saying I was very petty, because I remember committing my first salary to to harassing him, so to speak. And so I got a lawyer in Nairobi and sent the demand letters. We went through the entire process. But you see, his issue in court was that this is not my child. This is not my child. This is not my child. And I remember we had a fantastic magistrate who said, there's no woman who just walks around this earth claiming someone is responsible for their child, And he was better placed financially than I was. So the court ordered him to pay for the DNA test, and then we take it up from there. And so he actually paid for the DNA test. Results were out, I think, in a week. I remember us meeting, he's like, oh, this is my boy, whatever. And so from that point, he took charge. And I didn't care what was happening in his life, whether he had 7 wives. It was not my business, as long as my son was taken care of. And also gave me room now to grow my career. And so that happened. And interestingly, within 2-3 years, we'd become the best of friends. And co-parenting was working very well. And so then I moved from Nairobi and got a job in Kakamega. So I moved to Kakamega, of course, with my son and started my life here in Kakamega. And then he would come. He would come, initially when you're co-parenting, it's those things for, let me take the child to a petrol station and you pick him from there, or in front of the butter next to the, So it got to a point it became, it was okay. He would come to my house, pick the boy, got into a point where his wife and him and his kids, they would go on holiday with my son. We had gotten to a very good point. And I'd call the wife, how is Ethan doing? Does he need anything? The wife would call me, Ethan is here. So it was perfect. Now come 2018. 2018 was a very good year for me. So I'd finally settled in my career. I'd even set up 2 offices. I was doing well. My son was doing well. And my birthday falls on July. So I decided I'm going to throw myself a major bash for my 33rd birthday. And at the same time, I was dating some fantastic Luo man, Luo men. And so this Jaluo was doing things I've never seen before and being super nice to me. And he was in the same line of work with me. So we bonded and we had such a beautiful relationship. And so on the very day that I was throwing my birthday was the day my son had a sports day in school. And it was being held at Buhungu, that's a stadium in Kakamega. And so his father called me. And prior to that, he had gotten a good job in Congo. So he'd been working in Congo for almost 4-5 years at that point. So he calls me and says, I'm back, I'm in the country. I want to come for Ethan's sports day. I say, yeah, that would be nice. And so he traveled and came all the way. That time there's stuff happening in my house. So the Luo boyfriend has gotten mbuzi, there's drinks, there's, I had 3 birthday cakes, the whole 9 yards. So I'm now thinking, this guy, he's here. We've been having great conversation. And amongst the conversations, he knows about, now I'm dating someone else, he knows about this guy. And I know his life, how things are not working out or not working out. I knew everything about his life. And so we had gotten to a point where he'd call me and say stuff like, Aki, I've met this chick, I think she's hot. Nini, he's there in Congo telling me those things. So we used to have all kinds of this. He'd become like a friend once more. And so he told me, my marriage is not working. We are going through issues, blah, blah, blah. But I've met this lady. I think I should marry her. Those very deep conversations. And so now he's come to Kakamega. So this guy is in the house waiting for me. This guy is at school at my son's sports day. I tell him now that you're here, I don't need to be here because I have guests in the house. You finish up with Ethan, then come to the house. And so we had a full-blown party, and now there were 2 men at the party. Ethan's dad is sitting somewhere at a corner, and this Mjaluo sponsor of the party is also there. So my friends are just telling me, wow, you are a pro. How are you doing this? So I'm like, as long as I'm not talking to either of them, this will be fine. And so the party went on, and this guy used to live in Kisumu, so he came back to Kisumu. I stayed home with Ethan's dad, so we start talking. He tells me stories about his life and how things are working and not working and blah, blah, blah. I don't think at that point he brought up the issue of me and him getting back together. That time we are counting, it's 10 years. 10 years of probably not even giving each other a hug. It's 10 years of kaa huko and I sit here, So it never even crossed my mind that this could be a possibility. And so he goes back home. And I asked him, by the way, what happened to Congo? Why would you leave such a job? And he says on the day he was to travel back to Congo, his wife hid his passport. Okay? And then by the time he was trying to get another passport, renewed passport, whatever, by the time he was going to Congo, he was fired. So he'd come back home to nothing. He didn't have a job. But around the same time, he'd gotten an offer to go study in Italy. He'd gotten a scholarship. Yeah, so he needed to pay a little bit of money, and he goes to Italy. So I even tried to changa some money for him. He's my friend, And then when he had money, he used to throw money my way, random, whatever. So I got some money for him, and he went to Italy. Didn't stay for long. Probably it was 4 months, 5 months, whatever. No, it was shorter than that because I remember seeing him in August of that year. I think I got this story, but anyway, at some point he was in Italy. And so, because we had gotten to a good place of co-parenting, my son would sometimes go, we'd share holidays. Like, I've have him in April, you have him in August, December. Selfishly, that was my time. And so this August, my son went to visit him. And each time my son went to visit, he'd go with my house help. Because I didn't want him to go there and come back. So, he didn't shower, he didn't brush his teeth. So he always went with my house help. And then he called me, when are you coming to Nairobi? You should come, we need to talk. And at that time, being the woman or the fool that I was, I kept thinking, now this Luo guy, he's nice, he's great. But he's not telling me what I want to hear. What do I want to hear? I want to hear. I don't know, even right now, if you ask me, I don't know what I wanted to hear, but I wanted to know that he wants to be with me, like he wants to be more serious in this relationship. And I'm thinking this guy is now hinting on the other side, like, this is it. I was reading something the other day, and it was saying that you cannot hear the voice of God when already in your mind you already think you know what you want him to say. So when God is speaking, it's not even God, it's you. And then you're like, this is God. This must be God. And so I went to Nairobi to visit. A week before I went to visit, he'd called me from the supermarket, and he says, I've walked out of this marriage. I'm actually out here buying plates and cups, and I'm small maker, I'm leaving, blah, blah, blah. And at that point, I was telling him, it's okay, you'll be fine. It was not from a point of, now this is my turn. It was more like, from everything you've told me, if this is what is going to give you peace, then go for it. And so I went to Nairobi, and I went to his house. He just moved to a tiny two-bedroom house. And all he had was a television and a PlayStation and a bunch of mattresses. And for him, he loves kids. So he always has, now, from his marriage now, he has 3 children. This first boy, then they had 2 children. And then his sister's 2 kids were with him and my son. So at that point in the house, there were 6 children. That gave him peace. That gave him joy, just coming home to kids, daddy, uncle, whatever. And so I stayed there on Friday. I was coming back to Kakamega on Sunday. So Friday, Saturday. So Saturday, he calls me and asks me, what are you doing? Very panicky. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just chilling in the house. She's like, this lady is coming. She's coming. I'm like, coming to do what? The son, now the older son, has told her that you are in the house and she's not having that. So she's coming. So I'm like, okay, let her come. So I get in the house. He came, probably 10 minutes later, he was in the house, followed closely by this lady. And she's such a tiny lady, 40, 45 kgs, very tiny. And so she comes in, fuming. And I was sitting somewhere, I was just seated somewhere in the sitting room. My niece was there. So I was combing her hair and whatever. The kids were going out to that place on Langata where they ride go-karts. GP karting, yes. So they were getting ready. Their dad and uncle was taking them. And so she comes and sits next to me on the arm of the chair. And she says, we need to talk. And I asked her just to talk about what? What are you doing here with my husband? And then I'm just combing this kid's hair. I'm like, not today, combing her hair. And then she says, I told her, you know what, if you have any issue, why don't you talk to your husband? I was invited here. I didn't want drama. And in the middle of that sentence, you took one of those pads from the PlayStation and she threw it across the room and hit the TV, and the TV broke. So the kids are there. It's getting crazy. I'm like, get the kids out of here. Get them out of this mess. And she gets dramatic, and the insults, unmentionables. I'm just there quiet, laughing. At the point I was even laughing. I was like, wow. And so he managed to escort her out of the house. And now I always feel like that was red flag number 1. This lady had not left. And so months later, now this is October, I had an interview in Nairobi. There was a job I was applying for in one of these organizations that works with refugees. And so I go to Nairobi for my interview. Jaluo graciously takes me to the airport. I go to Nairobi. I sit my interview, and I was staying at my brother's house. And so my brother's wife and her sister were also there. And so we used to enjoy evening prayers, singing together, nini. I remember that night we were praying. We were like, hey, you should get this job. And because my sister-in-law's sister and myself were the single ones, God, we were even praying for good men, So we prayed, and I came back to Kakamega. So my life changed within, I think, 4 days. My life had changed completely because I landed in Nairobi, in Kakamega, in Kisumu. On my way to Kakamega, I got a call, and I'm told, come back tomorrow. You need to start training. You've gotten the job. So I'm thinking, okay, what about my offices? What about my son's school? What about? But it was an interesting job, something I really wanted to do. And so within 1 week, I was back in Nairobi for training. And the day I landed like this, I was told, now you've gotten the job, but you're going to be posted in Garissa. I'm thinking, Garissa, tena. But then they told me, you remember the interview, they asked you if you can work in a hardship area? That is that hardship area. So I'm thinking Garissa, I'm just thinking of bombs and people killing me, Al-Shabaab. And as I was walking out of, because now the place is in Lavington, so very close to my brother's, I was just walking back to the house and he calls me, he being my son's father, and says, now I've been thinking, I feel like you and I can have a relationship. I think we should get back together, raise the kids. You're walking on the road, you're just like... And then, so what? That time, that thing for God, this must be God. This must be God. And so I went home, I told my sister-in-law, guess what? Guess who has called me? And so I felt like things were aligning, because now I'm going to Garissa. I didn't know where Garissa was, but I knew it wasn't very far from Thika. I knew now that Ethan was moving to a new class. Everything looked like it made sense. I remember talking to my sister-in-law, and she told me, you've not known this guy for long. 10 years is a long time. He's not that guy you used to know. My opinion would be, get your job in Garissa, get your house in Nairobi, come over the weekends, let him date you, or date him, get to know him again. In my head, I'm thinking, hey, why are you telling me this? You're married. This is my opportunity. So I called him again. I was like, yeah, imagine I've gotten that job and it's in Garissa. He tells me, come, let me take you to Garissa. Have you been to Garissa? Like, no, that time it's 1 p.m. He's like, let's go to Garissa. I'm just like, oh, wow. Oh, the things I've been praying for, huh? So we get into the car. And we drove to Garissa at 1 p.m. We didn't even know where Garissa was. We just knew the direction. We got to Mingi. We were like, oh my God, this is Garissa. We're taking photos. Someone tells us, Garissa, Bado. So we went to Garissa. It was such a road trip for us because at some point the engine got spoiled. We had to ride in what are they called, breakdown vehicles. Spent the night in Garissa. He took me to my new office. So he spent the night in Garissa. He took me to my new office. He's like, doesn't seem bad. You come to Garissa. And so we're saying Garissa is not so far. It's like 4 or 5 hours. Let's say 5 hours from Thika to Garissa. So you can easily be doing this trip. I say, hey, God, thank you. And so because I didn't have time to do much, I just had to come to Kakamega and pack a few of my clothes because there's not even time to move because you have 2 weeks to report to your new station. And so that's began my life as a as a stepmother of many and a wife again. And I think because I had been auditioning all my life to be a wife, this was now my opportunity to showcase my skills. And our mothers, they're like, hey, ukienda huko, make sure this and this happens, make sure this and that, this is God, So there was also a lot of God from other people. This is God's doing. And so got there. First of all, I'm very confused because now I have one child who is very organized. I know I want my stuff done. Now I find myself with 6 children, his, mine, and his sister's children. I'm just thinking, wow, what is this? So I called my mom. I remember I called her and she said, Apana, these children, ndio baraka yako. You must love those children, take care of them, don't complain, even if they make, you'd call and say, sasa ndio wamepanda kwa viti, wamechafua. He's like, get someone to clean. Don't let that be an issue. My mom found everything. He's a nice man.
100 African Stories, the Legally Clueless 2021 tour powered by African No Filter. We're traveling through Kisumu, Nakuru, Mombasa, and Nairobi, bringing you real, raw, and inspiring African stories. I hope you enjoyed Edna's story thus far. My goodness. If you think that is like a roller coaster of a story, I can't wait for you to hear part 2, which will be in next week's episode 134. And Edna's story was recorded while we were in Kisumu. So bits of her story are in the video episode. So you can head over there and you'll see Edna live, sharing this movie of a story of hers. But she's got such good energy and is such a survivor. I can't wait for you to hear part 2. Now, speaking of the video series, do check out our YouTube channel. A link to that is in the show notes. Head over there, like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and most importantly, which you always do so well, share our video series with your community. I am currently trying to figure out season 2 of the video series. Definitely going to have that out before the end of the year, which should be super fun. So before we get there, just share what's already on the channel. Yeah. I'm very proud of our YouTube channel. I'm proud of the work that we're putting in there. And if you're new to this podcast, audio episodes go out every single Monday. So make sure you're always ready to start off your week right with us. And lastly, this podcast plays on Trace Radio in Kenya. And so if you head over to traceradio.co.ke, you can get a list of all the frequencies of Trace in the country. And you can also stream Trace there. So you'll catch Legally Clueless on Trace every Monday and Wednesday at 12 noon and 11 p.m. and every Friday at 12 noon. Okay, I'm going to end this episode here because I have to do some preparations for a very fun project stroke travel thing that's coming up with the podcast. I'm so excited about it, but I've been sworn to secrecy. And I have to prove whoever swore me to secrecy wrong, because they were like, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be able to keep this to yourself. So I have to in fact, you know what? I've already said too much. Can I just end this episode right here? That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.